De nuevo estamos en el Campus Juste 2015 y entramos ahora en el momento del debate y el diálogo con uno de los responsables de la International Religious Liberty Association, una asociación que lleva más de 115 años dedicada a la defensa de la libertad de religión y de conciencia en los foros internacionales. Yo quisiera explicar, antes de dar la palabra 2 minutos solo, el por qué está aquí Ganun Diop. La Academia Europea de Juste se dio cuenta, fue consciente, de que era necesario, más allá del ámbito europeo, buscar en los instrumentos internacionales la razón del por qué la religión importa. Y forma parte de ese elenco de derechos fundamentales, como decía Ganun Diop, la importancia que se le da a la libertad de religión y de conciencia en el conjunto de los derechos humanos. Es necesario saber los múltiples significados que tiene ese derecho en el escenario internacional para poder luego bajar a nivel regional a entender el significado de ese derecho. Son muchos los ejemplos que él podría haber puesto sobre cuándo se acepta, cuándo no se aceptan los derechos, cuándo efectivamente las minorías están desprotegidas de ese derecho. También él fue invitado para hablar de la conexión que existe entre el derecho de libertad, religión y conciencia, que aquí nos importa cuando defendemos los derechos de las minorías y de las mayorías, con un foro como es Naciones Unidas. Fue consciente de que ese era su trabajo. Podría haber interpelado muy bien y podría haber hablado perfectamente sobre el diálogo interreligioso, que también nos interesa, porque es uno de los artífices de ese diálogo interreligioso a nivel internacional, porque la Christian World Communion está aunando a todas las confesiones cristianas en el espacio internacional. Es decir, que la figura suya abarca muchas facetas. Nosotros le pedimos que hablara de la conexión y del interés que tiene la libertad, religión y creencia en el marco de las Naciones Unidas y de los instrumentos internacionales, y esa es la razón por la que él se ha ceñido al guión. Yo le doy las gracias por su disciplina y por compartirnos, because we are with you and you are with us. And now the public has the word.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Muchas gracias y enhorabuena por su intervención, que he escuchado con muchísimo gusto. Quienes nos dedicamos al ámbito, trabajamos en el ámbito académico en materias de libertad religiosa, estamos o solemos defender la libertad religiosa como la primera de las libertades, y por eso me ha gustado mucho escucharlo, pero yo ahora a veces tengo una inquietud o una preocupación. Y es que en algunos sectores, por lo menos en la sociedad española, quizás ante una valoración poco positiva del hecho religioso, en nombre de la laicidad o de la secularidad del Estado, se limita o se restringe esa libertad. Es decir, la secularidad del Estado ha pasado de ser un instrumento al servicio de la libertad religiosa de todos a ser a veces un instrumento que se utiliza para limitar la libertad religiosa, para restringir la libertad religiosa. Y yo percibo con preocupación en algunos sectores de la sociedad española una visión de la religión como una enemiga de la convivencia, por lo menos si está presente en el ámbito público, y un afán a veces de recluirla únicamente al ámbito de la conciencia personal, pero sin una repercusión en la conducta pública, en el comportamiento, etcétera. Y quería saber un poquito cuál era su opinión sobre esta cuestión. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much for your thank you very much for your remark, encouragement, and then the question. It is a very delicate balance when we talk about religious, well, the relationship between the state and religion, because that's really the broader picture. But I can say the main function of the state is to guarantee the freedom of people. But when it comes to religious freedom, of course, because of historical misunderstandings and misperception, sometimes religious freedom is seen too narrowly. Because freedom of religion includes the freedom not to believe also. In other words, this is not just about religion. It is broader. Now, this is, I think, one of the reasons why it is important to share with people the broader view and saying, for peace, every citizen of a nation should enjoy their freedom. The freedom to believe, religious freedom, the freedom not to believe, freedom of belief, and so forth. So, if the state starts regulating, diminishing people's rights, then that is a factor of destabilization in any country. So it is really in the interest of government to protect, again, people. These are not just concepts that are defended, but also people. And I think the previous speaker mentioned that the protection of people with their right to believe or not to believe, their right to associate, basically religious freedom, if understood this way, can be extremely helpful. And I can say the same thing, especially in the European context, with the idea of laïcité. Again, a laïcité misunderstood makes it appear as if, oh, all right, now the state is for atheism. No. Laïcité was primarily, initially at least, 1905, was the idea of not privileging a faith or a non-faith over the other. That's a different approach. But misunderstood, it is as if, oh, now we have to take religion outside, a wall of separation, as some people will say. Delimitations, certainly, maybe a curtain, not to force on, but still enough freedom for people to be engaging the state and one another in all freedom in that sense.
Dos o tres vamos a enlazar. We are going to join two questions. Okay.
I'll talk in English, that's okay. Thank you very much for your brilliant presentation. It was really interesting. And I was wondering, you talked about NGOs helping state actors, and so I'm interested in knowing more about the practical action of your organization and how does it transmit these very important messages. And linking it with previous presentations, how do you include education in this very same transmission of such values? What's the part that how it is involved? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Alvaro, like I told you in the break time.
I remember.
I am a student in the University of Extremadura, and you have been talking about the United Nations and their goals, and I think that I wonder if you really think that the United Nations could really solve or change the problems in our world, and do you think that the United Nations have the power to solve the problems, or even if they are doing everything that they can do to change it, and more, what thing do you think that they could do better to solve our problems? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your great and interesting presentation. My name is Said. I am from Jaume I University in Castellón. As my friend said, You said you talk about the pillars of UN and the second pillar, the justice. Really, for me, it's very important to mention or to talk about the justice inside the UN system or structure. Do you think that 4, 5 countries with the right to veto, 5 countries permanent and the UN Council of Security, it's a justice, it's worth justice? Do you think that we need a reform of UN now? Because when they signed the charter, the UN Charter in 45, they were just 51 countries that they signed the charter. Now there are more than 190, and we still have just 5 countries with the right to veto, and they are the powerful countries. They are the countries who sell weapons in the world. They are the countries who had nuclear weapons. And the other question, do you think that it will be better to have NGOs not just working or collaborating in the UN project, but also as member of UN Council Security? Thank you.
One more question.
Excuse, I don't speak English, so I will speak in Spanish line. Thanks.
No problem.
Me temo,
la pregunta-
perdón,
quería preguntar.
Perdón. Siento el rigor con que yo me veo obligado a cerrar esta sesión, porque tenemos autoridades que vienen a compartir con nosotros la clausura y nos sentimos en una situación muy incómoda porque ustedes no pueden terminar de responder. No sé si tenemos 1 minuto o 2. Sí, 2 minutos para responder. ¿La pregunta suya se queda en el aire otra vez o le dejamos de consultarla? Adelante, por favor. Pero 1 minuto.
¿Puedo preguntar? Intentaré ser breve. El término religión hace referencia a religion, a religare, del término latín, unir en un objetivo común, y las sociedades nos unimos, las personas nos unimos en un objetivo. Pero esta unión siempre se hace normalmente en contraposición con otros. En este sentido, quiero preguntarle, a lo mejor tal vez si Carlos V hubiera sabido responder alguna de las menciones 95 que hizo Lutero, a lo mejor el calvinismo no hubiera existido, ni a lo mejor su país como Estados Unidos, ¿no? Quiero decir, en este sentido, es importante que existan organizaciones que sepan debatir o limitar en un momento dado lo que son las expectativas o los anhelos de ciertas organizaciones religiosas en su objeto o en su desarrollo de lo que es su ideología religiosa. Y otra cuestión, en la medida en que se fomenta el desarrollo de ONGs, ¿no estamos un tanto reconociendo la deslegitimación de los gobiernos para ejercer esta función que en definitiva no es otra que la representatividad de sus ciudadanos?
All right. Fascinating question. This is really a very special group, I must say, you know. A very, very mature question. So let me start with the first one just briefly. Our organization, I mean, fundamentally attempts to promote a culture of human rights focusing on religious freedom. Again, because this is a central, when you deal with religious freedom, you also touch with others. So how do we do that? Through the organization of several events around the world. I mentioned the meeting of experts. Like every year we go to a major university around the world, engaging teachers, and we have guests from all over the world coming to that. So that is one venue. You have a congress. I just mentioned that every 4 years and so forth, 5, we have a world congress where we invite government officials, you know, politicians and so forth, so on. You have other more popular, you have symposiums also all over where we meet, you know, again to try to spread this culture of human rights, focusing on religious freedom. And of course, at a popular level, festivals, you know, where we go to a given country, just thanking the government for not giving, the favor of religious freedom, but for protecting it and for protecting its citizens, actually, allowing them to freely live their freedom. So that's one. Now, you mentioned on an educational level, we're really thinking very seriously in helping schools to integrate within their curriculum, right, this idea of religious freedom and human rights. So basically designing a curriculum in that sense. And of course, this is why I was congratulating this, this school here, precisely because I think now, just by interacting with this is a topic that each one of you will have an opportunity to deepen, interact, communicate, exchange, and so forth, so on. So, helping spread the culture of human rights and, of course, religious freedom in that sense. Okay? Now, I am not, and I'm saying this so that you can smile, I'm not paid by the UN in order to promote the UN. In other words, what I'm saying is this: yes, the UN is a good institution. There's no question about it. It is a good institution, but it is like any institution can improve. And we cannot expect the UN to solve all the problems of the world. You have to understand that the UN does not have executive power, right? Even the peacekeepers, like when you think about that dimension, peacekeeping, it did not, let me just make a very difficult statement. The peacekeeping forces of the UN did not stop some genocides around the world. You see what I'm saying? So that means that something is missing in the process. But these are people of goodwill. The UN cannot impose on a given country because the countries keep their sovereignty. That is a difficult balance, you see. So, but they are people of goodwill, and as people talk to one another, again, remember, before they were waging wars without mediations, but now there's an international organization facilitating, mediating. So that may have prevented many wars. So there are successes, but shortcomings also at the same time. And this brings me to the, can the UN be reformed? Of course. Must it be? Of course. Talking about I now move, I'm trying to combine several, moving to the issue of justice. That is such a big issue. For no nation ever in history has succeeded to establish a reign of justice within its own people. Go back to when the Egyptians were the world power, right? Then the Assyrians, current Iraq, then the Babylonians, and then the Medes and the Persians. All these nations have had opportunity to rule the world, basically. And then, of course, the Greeks, and then the Romans, and then the Byzantine Empire, and, then you have the Mongols, and then you have, the Turks, and so forth. I mean, the Arab Muslim Empire, and so forth. But none of them has succeeded. And let me continue to say, I know I'm in Spain, so I will not mention Spain when it was, so I want to go back safely to where I come from. So anyway, no, just kidding. No, but every nation, you think about Spain, when it was the world power, good things every nation have done, certainly. But the reign of justice, it didn't exist. The fulfillment of that, The UN, why do they only have 5 now? The geopolitical configuration of the world has changed. That requires maybe new changes, and this is why there are discussions. These are not new ideas that we are bringing. People have been thinking about this, but still it has not gone through. But maybe the conversation has to continue until justice also be seen in the structuring of international organizations such as the UN. So that's why we continue hoping, continue discussing, continue encouraging people in particular. So let me just stop it.